Okay guys, walk through setting up the interior text pages for your book projects in InDesign. InDesign again is for the interior text pages in particular and for your covers. The best option is to use InDesign for your layouts. If you're doing things in Photoshop, like we mentioned, say cover, treatments, images, any sort of specific, type treatments that you might need Photoshop for, that's fine to do titles and covers in there, but when you're going to want to bring those into InDesign still and do things for your back cover, anything where you're going to be involving text and any level of detail, you want to work with InDesign to do that, okay? So obviously the interior pages are going to be best served to be done in InDesign. And so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go to InDesign and create a new document, as we can see, and it's set up at 6x9. As you know, that's the template size that you're using for the covers that I've provided. Again, if you're choosing to do a different size book, just consult with me and let me know and make sure you have templates provided. But for now, we'll walk through the standard size here that we're using for the project. You're going to create your page size at 6x9. Okay, so you're not going to be setting it up on a larger page and then making a box around it to show a page. You're going to actually set it up to the real actual size. You're going to use facing pages for this, which is going to give you spreads that will indicate each page will be obviously separate, but they will be presented together. Whenever you drag pages down into your document, they will be set up as facing pages to create a spread. Okay. And then for margins, you can just rough in some margins here. I'm going to go for a generous top and bottom margin. An inside margin and outside margin. You have to consider the fact that you're in a real book situation. You're going to have a gutter, so where the book folds, there's going to be a little bit of extra space usually on those sides, because when the book's opened up, you don't want the text spilling into the gutter, and you have to pull the book apart to be able to read the inside. The first lines of each paragraph, the left side, the left aligned text. So I'm going to go ahead and set that up, and you can always tweak your margins inside. So another thing I'm going to provide for you here is if you go to a couple of these sites, there's a site here, and there's this Understanding Book Layouts and Page Margins. I'll put links to this into in this discussion here. There's another one here where you can look up book design tips on margins, and there's a whole bunch of information that you can incorporate for your own choices here. And then there's a whole list of additional book design information here, links to click on. Keep in mind that a lot of these, especially this book designer, it's for people that are self-publishing. So take it all with a grain of salt and use it as a general guideline. And at the ultimate decision, make sure you trust your own eye when you're making your own books. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and set that document up and see what it looks like. Okay. And on my first page here, and you're thinking, whoa, this is strange because it looks so asymmetrical, and that's okay. I mean, we can always tweak here. You can always tweak in your margins and columns here if you want to. In fact, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do this. I am going to make a tweak right now. I'm going to make this a little bit larger at the bottom, and I'm going to use that as my main. And the thing is there, when you're doing that, it's best. So just now I made a change, but I only made a change to that page because I had that page selected. So click off the page, go into your margins and columns, and you're going to want to select the margins and columns. You're going to want to make those changes when you're doing it off of a selected page, because if I have a page selected and I make any changes, I'm making changes to that page instead of to the entire document. Okay, so I just want to double check here and make sure I'm good. And that's pretty much what I want. Okay, so now I see that when I drag pages down here, here's my master pages. And if I click on my master pages here, I'll see that I'm still looking at this spread. And I don't have anything on here yet. What I would suggest doing is adding your chapter titles and your page numbers here. Okay. You can see I have a document set up here, and I have some master pages already set up. In fact, I have 3 sets of master pages to show you a few different options. But here in my master page, I've set a basic running header, some titles, and I've set some page numbers. Now you see these page numbers, and you're thinking, why does it say A? I don't understand that. Well, I created these text boxes here, and I've selected. When I have the text selected, I go into my type, and I go to Insert Special Character, Markers, and then you go to Current Page Number. Okay, so when you do that, you got to do this on your master pages. It's going to automatically fill out the page numbers for you. So you can imagine how beneficial that is when you're doing it in a full-on book. So you're going to go to Type, Insert Special Character, Markers, and then Current Page Number. And this is on the master page. And now you'll see that that A, I have an A here. If I go to my B masters here, it'll say B, and I'm just showing you some different alignment options here. If I go to my C master, it'll say C. But when you pull these pages down into your document, you'll see 2, 3, 4, 5. They're automatically numbering themselves. Okay, and so that's a big benefit. For your purposes, only doing 2 spreads, that's not absolutely essential. And the other thing too is, let's say you do something like on this page here. Let's say this is your table of contents page and your copyright page, and you don't want page numbers on those necessarily. Or if you do, maybe they're they're pre-numbered matter. You know what I mean? They might be set in Roman numerals or something, like you'll see in the beginning of books. But here, I don't want running heads on my table of contents and my copyright page. And when I go to delete those, I can't delete them because they're on my master pages. Okay, so what you need to do in InDesign is hold Shift Command and then select. So Shift Command and then select, and then you can delete them. On that page. Okay, Shift Command and then delete them. So now I can see here. If let's say I have this is my title page, and this is my copyrights page and my table of contents page, and then in my first spread, you'll see it starts to number the pages for me. Now, if you're doing, chapter 7 or something, this number is not going to be 4 or 5. You're going to want to go in and customize that number based on the actual page numbers that you're designing for. Okay, and again, so you don't have to set that up on your master page if you don't want to, but I want you to know how to do that. Even if you did set it up on your master page and you wanted to make the change here, you could just again select Shift Command, and then you could manually tweak it here. Let's say it's page 45, etc. You would have to do that to each one. Okay, so that's your call how you want to handle that. And these are just really roughly treated chapter intro and running heads. These you'd want to, and the text is pretty basically roughed in here as well. As you can see, it's placeholder text. What I've done is just shown you an example of indented matter, instead of space before after or space before paragraphs, and then here's using the space between the paragraphs here. Okay, so you have 2 different alignment options. You wouldn't have this in one spread. Obviously, you're going to make a choice, and in order to do that, you're just making these tweaks in your paragraph palettes. Okay, here you can see that why this is blank here is because I've selected this whole thing. What I did is if you go to this, you can see that there's a 1/4 inch space or indent before each paragraph. I don't have that here. I have that set to 0 because the first paragraph of a chapter does not need to be indented. Okay, so that's why I went in and just tweaked that one and took that space out specific to that first paragraph. Okay, so your first paragraph. If you're using indents, your first paragraph of a chapter does not need to be indented. Okay, that would be redundant essentially. So you'll see that's often the case. If you're using space between paragraphs, it's less of an issue there. How you treat your running heads and your page numbers, you can do that in any number of ways. Try to stay within the typefaces you're using. So here there are 2 typefaces used. There's a Garamond for text and the Berthold Accidens Grotesque, it's called, for running heads, and maybe my title page would incorporate that. That's up to you. Think about the type you're using on your book covers. Can you bring those in and use those? If it's obviously overly decorative, that's not going to be doable. But if you're using it, say, for the back matter on your cover, you're using a combination of maybe a serif and a sans or whatever. Consider how you can bring one of those typefaces in and maybe use those for your running headers. Okay. This you could do in a much more interesting way. And what you might want to do is have a separate text box for your chapter title. It might be easier to work with instead of having to work within the actual paragraph text boxes. Okay, and if you were doing this in a real book setup, you would have master pages set up with different formatting. So your chapter starts would have a specific layout already pre-formatted. We're not doing that here, so that's less of a concern. Okay. So what we're doing to create those items on our master page is simply, when you open your document, it starts out with an A master. The only thing that will be in here is an A master page. So all I did is I went in there and I added 2 text boxes. Okay, and the nice thing here is if you make the text box go directly all the way across the page, and then in your paragraph palette you can see these are set to centered because they're centered on the page. It's going to always make sure that that type is, no matter how long it is. If I add more more type here, I don't know why it's previewing like that. You can see it's I didn't even spell it right. You can see it's always going to make sure my type is in the center. Okay, so that's a cool benefit to that. And the other thing you'll notice is that the type itself is centered in the box. Okay, so all I've done is I've used my margins, I've centered it top and bottom and left and right. Okay, and then I've gone, because if you go to your text box and you make type in here, it's automatically aligned to the top of the box. If you go to Object, Text Frame Options, you go down to the vertical justification in this alignment here, you have an option here. It's going to usually be showing like this. So if you make a text box, your type will always sit at the top. You have to come here and actually make it centered, okay? And then you can hit OK, all right? So again, to make sure that this text is sitting in the center of the text frame, you're going to go to Object, Text Frame Options, come down to vertical justification, and go Align Center, okay? And I've done the same thing for my page numbers, as you can see, okay? And you can see these aren't pulled all the way to the side here. The only reason is because when I put them on here, if you use your smart guides, you can see that's telling me where center is anyway. So you can also use your smart guides. It's better, for longer text, where I know that this is going to be, a varying size. Maybe this is my chapter. You can look at how you want to format this. Sometimes a book will have the author's name and the chapter title, or the title of the book and the chapter title. So make sure you decide which one works best for your case, okay? So all I've done is I've set up the master pages. I've put in those special insert characters for the page numbers, as we mentioned. And I set up, 3 different versions just to show you that, okay, you can align your running heads and page numbers in any way that works for you. So they don't always have to be centered. They could always align to the outside. Here, they might align to the, this one, they always align to the inside margins here, even though the pages still go to the outside corners. You'll see any number of treatments. Sometimes this will be, you'll see odd situations where your type will always align, the numbers will always align on the left, as will the titles. So there are a lot of different ways to do that. Okay, you can make the call that works best for yours, okay? So a few different options there, and you'll see once you have those set up, when you pull pages down, if I go back to my A master here, and I pull in, I'm going to select this whole spread, I'm going to select both pages, and I'm just going to drag that down. If you drag pages down next to the current page, that'll put new pages in for you, okay? So I put in new pages here. If I go to click on those, these are the pages that we deleted the title on, and here are the new pages I just added. And you can see it automatically inserted the page numbers 4 and 5, which replaced the 4 and 5 on these. Now these are 6 and 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, etc. Okay, that's because it's all done on the master pages. Master pages are definitely, super useful, especially when you get into longer term, longer formatted documents. Okay. So always make sure a couple things too, and I know that some of you are already aware of this. Make sure your display performance under View is set to high quality, okay? Because otherwise, even text sometimes can look lower when it's set to the fast display or typical display. Things won't look as sharp, especially once you start to bring images and your covers and things. And make sure your display performance is always set to high quality display, okay? And another thing I want to say that is probably good to add, okay, is and this is going to be for our PDF viewing options, okay? You can see that here I've entered I've just made I used the line tool, and I made a stroke right down the middle of the page, okay? And right now it's set to 1 point, which I think is too heavy. I'm going to set that to 0.5 point. And the reason I'm doing that, I have one here too, or I should, I thought I did. You know what I did? It's up here, I think. No, it's not. Okay, so I'm going to add one. Okay, cool, so we only did it on the one here. I'm going to go ahead and, in fact, once I make one, all I have to do is hit Command-C or Control-C. And I'm going to go down in here, and I'm going to click on this spread. I'm going to have both pages selected. I'm going to go Shift, Command, Shift Command Option V. Okay, and it's going to paste it right in place. I go down here, Shift Command Option V, same thing. Shift Command Option V, etc. So now, the reason I've done that is because when I go to export this as a PDF, if I do it without this line, it's fine, but this line here that delineates your two pages will not show up. So when it displays as a PDF, it'll just be blank here. So we have a big blank gap in the middle. And the reason why I like to put that sort of, is that's just sort of an artificial divider, really, that is good for a visual when we make the actual PDF. So to show that example, I'm going to delete that. And I'm going to go ahead and export this as a PDF. Okay. I'm just going to save it to desktop real quick. I'm going to go to all. Okay, so export. Now when I go to my desktop and I open my PDF, we'll see, there's my first page. That's the blank page that we deleted everything on. There's the other blank pages that we just brought in as an example of showing how to bring in the master pages. And here's the page that we just looked at. It doesn't look bad without the divider, but it just helps to have it. So you can see here's the ones with the divider that I actually put on the page. Okay, it just does give us a sense of how the pages, how your margins are working and that kind of thing. So putting in that divider helps us a lot. Okay, the difference is clear there. Okay, so just make sure you do that. Let's see, what else do we want to talk about? Make sure, and I've already talked about this in a prior video, but make sure you go into your preferences in InDesign and go to your composition and select your H and J violations, okay? Hyphenation and justification violations. And that'll show you any spots that have a little bit of trouble going on with extra spacing and that kind of thing. And when we're using justified columns, there's always going to be a bit of fudge factor. We're going to have to deal with a little bit extra spacing here and there. And as you can see, these pages are not that bad. You can go in there into your paragraph and go into your justification and make your modifications in here as needed. Okay. You can also, if you need to, when you make tweaks in here, sometimes you'll see that especially if I go down, if I reduce here, it'll sometimes create more problems. If I want to tighten up the letter spacing even more, if I open the letter spacing too much, it starts to get too open. We don't want to do that. Okay, so you can decide. Okay, are these issues enough to where I want to fix them? And you can decide. You can go in and automatically tweak them by using your tracking, for example. You can add a little bit more space in there. That got rid of that problem. Add a little bit of tracking. You can also sometimes take out tracking, and then sometimes the lines will break in a different way, so you got to do both lines. And so it can be kind of messy if you're not careful. But again, I'm not going to get too deep into this because we've talked about in the last video. As you know, the darker the yellow, the more of an issue you have. So that's something to think about as well. I added a little more tracking there, and that one's pretty close to good. It doesn't look that different than the ones above. Okay. So if I'm looking at these and I know that I have justified type, if I have a whole page of yellow, that's when you're really dealing with an issue, okay? And if you want to keep that on while you're working on your document, you can. Again, there's a whole other video on how to really refine and modify that, so make sure you go into that. I'm going to take my H and J violations off now so we can just look at it as it is. And the pages themselves, if I'm looking at them, they look pretty good considering, okay? Now, you're going to always, if you can, printing is ideal, okay? Because that's really going to ultimately be the test. Because again, even when we're looking at this, the way things preview on screen, if I look at it zoomed out where it's fit on my screen, and then I go to 100%, you can see it already starts to look different. If I zoom in even more, it starts to look almost so open that I know that when I print this, this is not how it's going to look. Okay, so even though it looks like a slightly more tracked out and more open on this screen here, it's going to really vary in your screen previews. Okay, so the only real test is how it's going to look when it's printed. That said, for our purposes, I'm grading it in a PDF format. So the best thing to do is get it as dialed in and refined as you can in your PDF preview. Okay, because that's essentially what we're gonna be grading on. Okay. So again, make sure just to reiterate, you add that center line in your pages. Okay. And again, you can align your page numbers and your running heads in many different ways. You can have your margins set however you want. We just fudged in these margins, and they're not actually that bad. Okay, I don't mind the way the pages are laying out here. Okay, and again, it's very rare that you're going to center a box exactly perfectly centered on the page. You're going to always have a slightly asymmetrical layout, depending on, again, how much room you need for margins and that kind of thing. Okay, but as long as it looks cohesive and it feels right and it feels readable. And again, these treatments, you can make your chapter treatments as wild as you want, or as mellow as you want, or as long as it feels like it fits the context of your book. That's up to you. But let's say you come into your first document here, this document that we set up. I only have one page in here, and when I'm setting up the document, I might go, okay, here's my chapter. I'm sorry, my title page. Okay, that very first page that mentions the title of the book, and it's a full title page. It'll mention the book and the author, probably a publisher, that kind of thing. And then I'm going to bring in my first spread, because my first spread, what I know, is going to be my copyright page and my table of contents. Now, for those pages, you might not use this exact same layout for your format. You might not use the same margins that you're going to use in your actual text pages. So in an actual book document, you might have, again, several different masters set up, and you have a master that's specifically for your copyright and title page, where the margins might be a little bit different so they can accommodate that type of content. Okay, so make these, if you're making your text margins, they don't necessarily have to be the ones you use for your first pages, your copyright pages, your title page, etc. Okay, so just be aware of that. So here I'm going to have this is my title page. Here's going to be my copyright and my table of contents. And then I'm going to bring in my first chapter spread and my second chapter spread. Okay, and that's essentially what your document should look like. Okay, minus all the margins set up and the master pages set up. You'll essentially have those pages here. Your title page itself can also be a full spread. Okay, you're welcome to do that. And there are different ways to do this. An easy workaround is, okay, say if I want my title page to be a spread, I'm just going to leave this page blank. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and start here. I'll do my title page. Let's say it's a full spread title page, copyright, table of contents, chapter beginning, next page in the chapter. Okay, so if you have the option of finding a PDF version of your book or a preview, and you can copy and paste the text from that, that is ideal. That's the best situation. Okay, I'm not necessarily going to ask that you type 4 pages of text in if you don't have to. I prefer you don't use this, because it's not really. It's just a different scenario. It's fine for placeholder, but it'd be better to have actual text in there. Okay. If you can't find a version that you can copy and paste, let me know, and we can work with the placeholder text if it works well. Okay. I think that's most of what I wanted to talk about here. We covered a lot in a short period of time, and I know that we moved pretty quickly. So if you have any questions, again, make sure you look at all the resources that I'm going to be posting for you, including different links, and then get a hold of me with any questions you might still have. All right, thanks.